spoilers for episode 2 for Moon Knight if you haven't seen it. Moon Knight, episode 2, is actually out now, and I had no idea. I thought these episodes came out Thursdays or Friday, but it's currently about 2 p.m. on Wednesday, and the episode 2 dropped today. So I'm going to watch this and kind of give either a live reaction to it, maybe while I'm watching it, or I'm going to talk about it after I watch the episode. But I'm going to watch this, and I'll get back to you. Alright, I finished the episode, and wow, what a great episode. That was awesome. There's a lot that goes on in this episode, and there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to condense it into a short video that's not too long for this, but there's a lot that goes on in this. What I said in the last video about episode 1, what I think was wrong about how each episode is dedicated to a certain personality, but again, there's 6 episodes, and he doesn't have that many personalities in his DID, or dissociative identity disorder. But this takes us still with Stephen Grant, but we learn a lot about Mark Spector in this episode. This is kind of like an origin for him, because again, not many people know this character, so they need to introduce him somewhat, and this is basically the origin without giving us the actual flashbacks or origins that we're used to. The episode talks a lot about Mark Spector and what happened with him and Khonshu, and the relationship between Mark Spector and Khonshu. Not even only Mark, but Stephen Grant and Khonshu. Just the relationship in general with Khonshu and this person that we know that has a the identity disorder is fleshed out pretty well in this. And we learn a lot more about what happened with Mark Spector, why he's Moon Knight, and why Khonshu chose him, and why he's a fist of vengeance for Khonshu, and all that, and everything along them lines. So we do get a pretty good idea of Mark Spector and his history and his past. So it basically is an origin story. Well, it's not an origin story, but it goes into his origin about the character himself and what actually happened with him and the lore behind him, without actually having to go into these flashbacks and actually being an origin story. It delves into his origin and tells you these details about him. But they do it in a way where they do it in a way where Stephen Grant also learns about it, Mark Spector, and the viewers, the people watching it, also learn about it at the same time that Stephen Grant is learning about Mark, aka learning about his other identity. I not only wanted to say that, but I want to point this out. I love the whole supernatural feel that they're doing with this, and Khonshu, I love it, and they upped their game for this episode, even with how Stephen talks to Mark through reflections and just the voices in his head. It's all really cool. I like that a lot. And also, the episode begins off with Stephen at the gift shop trying to look at the surveillance cameras after the first episode's events, where the beast comes in, which now we know it's a jackal. It seemed like it was all in his head. But later in the episode, when Stephen comes across Arthur Harrow, we see that he summons a jackal, and that only the avatars can see him. Or only the people with these mystical powers are actually able to see the beast, and that's why it didn't come up on the surveillance. So I'm guessing, like I said, only the people with mystical powers or avatars, because we learned that Harrow used to be the avatar. He used to be Moon Knight, or maybe not Moon Knight, but he used to work under Khonshu. He used to serve Khonshu. But now that he doesn't anymore, and he knows Khonshu, he knows how Khonshu thinks, because he was the avatar of Khonshu before, and now Mark Spector is, aka Stephen Grant, or just that person in general. So Harrow knows how he thinks. So maybe only the avatars of these ancient gods or these deities can see these creatures when it comes down to the mystical powers and the ancient plane of existence. When it comes to the deities and Egyptian roots, we meet another character which is probably going to come up later since she's important to the story now and the scarab business. And that girl is Layla, Mark Spector's wife, or was wife, since we learned that they were going to get a divorce, and she comes up, but she talks to Stephen Grant. She doesn't talk to Mark Spector. So the whole time she thinks Mark's putting on some show or acting, but it's not. It's just a different personality that she's talking to, and she doesn't realize it. So that's pretty cool. And we see a huge conflict between Stephen and Mark in this episode, which is great. We really see the psychological conflict between them two, and it's all in his head, and even though it's real, it is them talking to each other, they do it phenomenally well in this, I think. But like I mentioned, the girl Layla, her visit to Mark, or to Stephen, is interrupted by what seems to be officials from the government or like police officers, but they're definitely not, because they take Steven into custody and whatnot. We see them get arrested and they take him somewhere, and he thinks he's going to, some like normal police station or something like along them lines, but it's not. They're actually followers under Amit, and they work under Arthur Harrow. Which I want to say that Ethan Hawke, I'm pretty sure his name is, the guy who plays Arthur Harrow, is a great actor, and he's very intimidating when he wants to be. Same with Oscar Isaac, the one who plays Stephen Grant and Mark Spector and Moon Knight. Overall, he's a phenomenal actor, or in his words, he's brilliant, bruv. He's really good. But let's get back to the episode. And yeah, they take him to this random place, which seems to be an abandoned building, but it's not. It's like an entire town. It's like a little village of people that follow Amit and serve under Amit, and like look up to Arthur Harrow as like this prophet, which I love, by the way. Like this old like ancient kind of deity thing they're doing, not even with just the gods of Khonshu and what probably going to be Amit later on, is awesome. There's always a level of like intimidation, but not even intimidation, like more of mystique with cult-like groups and how people look up to like other people, like our Harrow as like this prophet figure, which I think they do well in this. And this episode shows exactly why. Not only is it in his beliefs, but he's the leader of this whole village and this whole group that serves Amit. But we see his power as well. Like the cane he has, it's not no normal cane. It's powered by Amit, and what he says is a sliver of his Amit's power. And we get a not first look at it, because we've seen it judges people when he uses it on other people, but he literally summons a jackal. Like we actually see him do it this time, unlike we did in the first episode. If you've seen the episode already, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But he literally pokes into the ground, and the rocks and rubble beneath him begin to crack and turn and glow, and a jackal is literally summoned from like the underworld or something like that, and it looks awesome. And in this part of the episode, we get a good deal of that conflict between Mark and Steven, which I really like. Which I think over the course of the show, or towards the end of it, Steven's going to allow Mark to do what he does, and he's going to understand the ways of Khonshu and of what Mark actually does with the Moon Knight suit. And speaking of suit, let's get into something else. Actually, before I get into the suit topic, I want to talk about Layla again for a second, because people that know the character already know that Mark Spector is the true one, is the true person, and that's the main identity. But we're getting the perspective of Stephen Grant, like another personality that Mark has, that's in control of his body, that we see in these episodes so far. But if they do stay true to the character and make Mark the main character, that means that Stephen Grant was an alter that came after, and the way that he is interested in like the hieroglyphs and Egyptian history and French, like poetry and all that, that means they could have made it like a way where he wanted to stay close to Layla without like harming her or anything like that, because of an alter ego and like a side personality actually being attached to them interstill, which is kind of like bittersweet. I just wanted to point that out. That's pretty cool. But let's go. The suit. I'm going to bring up the village again, because that's where this takes place. But Steven is taken by these like thought of cops, but then they weren't actually cops. They were just the followers of Amit and followers of Arthur Harrow. But he's taken in by them, and that's where we learn that Arthur was the former avatar of Moon God Khonshu, and that's why he's talking to Steven, or he wants to speak to Mark, but he's talking to Steven about how he shouldn't trust the Moon God, and that like his judgment is better, and Amit's judgment is better, and he should believe in Amit and not like fight against it. And they want the Scarab back. And they have a little moment where Layla's actually there, and she has the Scarab, like we see her take it earlier in the episode when we thought to be cops came into his apartment or his flat, but whatever the case is, that happens, and they try to run, and Layla the whole time is pressuring what she thinks is Mark, but it's actually Steven. She's pressuring him to summon the suit, and she wants to be protected, and she thinks Mark is in control and still in act, and she needs Moon Knight to come out. Like she thinks that he needs to put the suit on. He needs to summon the suit to fight against Harrow and all these followers, and to defend themselves. And after a bit of denial and anger, Steven goes through with this, and he can't get Mark to come out. He can't summon the suit himself, but he does summon his own suit, which I loved, and I did not think this was going to be in this early in the show. Honestly, this might come up only once, and my episode might have been the only appearance of this suit and this personality. But in this, it's not even a personality. It's Steven's own iteration, like his image of the Moon Knight suit. And it's Mr. Knight. It's the Mr. Knight persona that we see comes up, that Steven tries to, like, summon the suit, but he, like, embodies and he creates his own sort of suit somehow. But he does it anyways. It makes it a very good scene. I love Mr. Knight, and I couldn't wait to see it, but this might be the only appearance of it, because I don't know what else he would use it for, unless they do use it for the whole, like, detective and, like, public image kind of thing, where he goes out in the public and talks to the police and such later on in the show. But like we see in the last, like, few seconds of the episode, he's actually in Egypt now. So I'm not sure if that's going to come up again or not, but I hope it does. But yeah, the suit, I didn't expect it to come up or anything like that, but I love Mr. Knight, and it was funny. And I don't know if that's from the comics, that Mr. Knight is actually, like, Steven's, like, version of the suit. I don't think it is, but it's alright. That's how they did it in the show, but I still loved it anyways. And then, of course, we see the other suit later on, after the whole ordeal with Mr. Knight, which I love, by the way. The way Steven talks, and he's like actually confident and with the suit on, and he's like, oh, like, you want to tussle kind of thing. Like, his accent, that makes it way 10 times better. But we do see the other more known suit of Moon Knight come out when Mark takes over his body, and we see that badass scene, and Moon Knight full on impales the jackal, which is sick. And then we see that Mark and Steven, like, still fighting each other in his mind, and they have this, like, mental battle. And after that, we learn that he has no scarab, and Layla doesn't have the scarab, but it is on the street somewhere, and some guy finds it, and then Harrow straight up just comes over and kills him, and then takes the scarab for himself. Which, by the way, I didn't say it already, but the way Harrow describes Amit and what his beliefs with Khonshu and Amit, it actually does, like, sound, like, understandable. He sounds like you could understand where he's coming from, and, like, he's actually in the right, but even though he's in the wrong. And him being in the wrong is, like, they straight up tell us that, because the way that he sees things is that Khonshu delivers, or he punishes the evil, and he fights against evil, and he fights for justice. That's what Moon Knight does, and that's why Khonshu has an avatar. That's why he brought Mark Spector back to life, and that's why Moon Knight exists, to fight for Khonshu and fight for justice. But Harrow believes in Amit's ideologies and thinks that no matter when the evil is done, a person must be judged before it even happens. So, like, to prevent the evil and to prevent the wrongdoings of that specific person. And Steven, like, questions him that himself, and was like, oh, like, you would kill a baby before they even, like 30 years from now, someone commits a crime, but you would kill them as a child, that sort of thing. Like, that's Harrow's kind of mindset with Amit. That's Amit's justice. So they do kind of make Harrow, like, sound kind of in the right for somewhat. Like, you could, like, understand where he's coming from, but then they turn around and be like, oh, wait, that's, alright, never mind. He's, like, definitely in the wrong. And then you're like, oh, alright, Team Khonshu. And then, but like I said, we see at the end of the episode, Mark's in control now, and it's probably going to be for the next episode. And I can't wait to see it, and more what he does with Moon Knight. And now he's in ancient Egypt, or wherever he's at in Egypt. And he's looking for the scarab, and he's looking for Harrow to make sure he doesn't unleash Amit. Which, by the way, it would be pretty badass if we actually see Amit come to life, and Khonshu actually fights Amit, like a Battle of the Gods sort of thing. That would be pretty cool. Like a last episode thing, Battle of the Gods. That sounds like a really, like, grand title. Alright, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it for this episode. And for this video, I think that I've said everything I wanted to talk about. I literally just watched the episode. Go watch it if you haven't. Well, I don't know why you would be here in the first place if you haven't seen the episode. But regardless, thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it greatly. The Moon Knight stuff has been doing well. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And again, thank you. I appreciate it greatly. And that's all. This has been Ghosty, and I bid you all farewell.